Welcome to Little Home Projects. I'm doing a complete garden makeover, and I plan on changing this overgrown patio and transforming it into a productive vegetable garden in just one summer. This patio garden hasn't had much attention in the past few years. This year though, I've decided I want to change. I'd like to make something a bit more productive. I want to grow some vegetables, and I want to make this look a lot better during the summer. I am going to have some of my work cut out for me though. Getting rid of these planter boxes is going to be hard. They're pretty heavy and they're full of roots that have gone down into the dirt below it. Another major task I'll have here is pulling out all the flowers and weeds that are growing in it already. Nothing's been done to this garden for a while, and a lot of these flowers and weeds are just kind of sprouting up wherever they happen to have had their seeds drop. I've got a few planters and a bench that I want to use in my new design, so I'll probably reutilize those to grow more vegetables out of as well. The dirt in this garden is also going to be another challenge. I'll have to add a lot of organic matter to make it nice and productive. So this represents a full weekend's worth of work. I spend most of the time just pulling out the old roots, getting out the old weeds, and removing the old planter boxes. I am pretty happy with how this stuff came out though. The dirt is a bit mucky and a bit gravelly at the same time, but the amount of space that I got out of it I think will be nice and productive. The main center space is 8.5 feet by 3 feet, and two little side plots of about 3 square feet each. I still have these two 4-foot planter boxes that had the ivy in them. I'll probably reuse these for other plants, tomato, kale, something like that. There was a lot of waste from doing this work, but I'm not yet set up to compost this amount of greens, but I do have an idea about that. Because my patio space is limited, I want to come up with a solution for composting that won't smell and that'll be able to expand if it works out. My plan is to use these 5-gallon pails as compost bins, but rather than just putting stuff in them and letting them rot, I want to modify them and sink them into the ground. My hope is that with this solution, I'll be able to continually add 5-gallon pails as I fill them up, and that way if it's working for me, I can keep adding. I decided to drill these 1-inch holes into the bucket. I'm also drilling holes on the side. This way I'll be able to bury the bucket into the dirt, and all sorts of things will be able to get in there, but I'll be able to keep mice and other rodents away. This seems to be a good blend of amount of holes and the amount of stability in the bucket still. I'm utilizing the space in my patio that doesn't get much sun. This way I get to use this area. Won't be for growing things, but it'll still be productive. And I figure while it's composting, it'll be adding a lot of nutrients to the soil in this area as well. Also, this space has the added benefit of me being able to expand the system as needed. I figure I can get 4 or 5 pails in here if I really wanted to. I'm going to use this old 5-gallon plant pot to measure out the portions of ingredients I'm going to add to the soil. I'm going to start out with loosened peat moss, 1 part compost. I'm going to use composted cow manure and composted mushroom manure. And finally I'm going to add 1 part of perlite. This is like a little white pebble that has a lot of surface area but allows water to drain. 1 5-gallon pail for me worked for about 2 square feet. Here is the peat moss down, and then next it was time to add the mixes of manures. You can see how 1 bucket covers around 2 square feet. I repeated this exact same step with the perlite as well. And when everything was said and done, mixed back in with the soil, this is what it looks like. The perlite gives it a light fluffy feeling, the compost gives it a bit of nutrition, and the peat gives it a good amount of water retention and air space. With the soil prepped, it's time for me to lay out the garden. I'm going to be using these cedar stakes. I bought them from Home Depot for about $6.50, and I'm going to be using them to lay out the square foot gardening method. This is a pack of about 20 cedar shims, and I'm using 100 feet of 1/4-inch rope. Because my garden space doesn't divide equally into 1-foot sections, I'm starting from the center and measuring out from there. I put down the center stake, and I'm using a piece of wood I've measured to 12 inches, using that to measure out where my next stake is going to go. So I just line up each position, and at the edge of the wood, I can press down my next stake. And because my soil has just been tilled, it goes in really easy, no tools needed. With one of those placed every foot, you can really get a sense of scale of how much space I'm going to have to work with. This makes it really easy to judge what kind of plants I can put where and how dense I'll be able to make them. Seeing them all here, I count just over 40 square feet of garden space. I started laying out the nylon rope. I started with the longest stretch right down the middle. Every so often looping the rope around stakes along the middle just to keep the whole thing straight. I then put in some of the cross pieces and I like the way it's looking. It really gives it a nice highlight and a nice fun grid pattern. And it was at this point I realized I wanted to actually add landscaping fabric to the garden before I put these lines down. So I have to take them up and put down the new fabric. This went in much easier than I was expecting, and the fact that I had the stakes already in kind of made it easier to get the whole thing held in place. I'm sure it would have been fine without them, but with the stakes there, I just put down the fabric in the spot that I wanted it, found the stake, scored a line across the top of the stake, and just pressed it down. This kept it all in place, and it was done in no time. So with all the landscaping fabric installed, I reattached my ropes, and I'm able to start planning out the garden. I've drawn up a grid of what I think I want to plant. I spent some time going through this by myself, just sort of deciding what it is I wanted to grow, what I thought would grow well in this space, and what I thought I'd actually use. I plan to plant a variety of different kales, basils, onions, peppers, radishes, garlic, Swiss chard, chives, and tomatoes. It's currently too early in the season to plant most of these things, but the garlic and onions, the garlic especially, should have been planted last fall, so I'm going to get them into the ground right away. This may not work, but I'm willing to give it a shot. I started by cutting a little cross slit in the fabric. This is where I'll insert the bulbs for the onions and garlic. I made sure to follow the pattern that I'd drawn out in my map. This made it really easy to figure out how many cuts I needed to make and which spaces should have the slits. I grabbed a small bag of bulk onions from the garden store. Didn't really realize though that they come in such wildly different sizes. Here you can see 2 bulbs out of the same bin. Very different. I'm assuming the larger ones are going to be the better choice to plant, so I'll plant all the large ones first, and then if I have empty spots, I'll use the smaller ones after that. To plant the onions, I just poked a hole into the dirt and pressed the onion bulb down into it. I just made sure the onion was the right way up, and the top of the onion was not below the top of the dirt line. Everyone tells me that garlic should have been planted in the fall. As I was shopping, I found some garlic at the garden store that had already started to sprout. I figured this might give me a slight head start because I'm planting so late, so I figured I'll give it a shot. I also grabbed one that doesn't have any sprouts starting. I can compare the two and see if there's any difference in the end. Using the square foot gardening method, garlic can be planted much closer together, so this is a lot more dense. To get ready for planting, I just peeled off the dry layers of the garlic and popped out the individual pieces. I broke them all up so that I had them all set aside and used the best looking ones for planting. One full garlic gave me 9 decent sized cloves. I'm not going to bother planting the other ones. These are nice and large. The ones that are left over just seem too small. I planted the garlic the exact same way I planted the onion bulbs. Just poked a hole and forced the garlic clove down in and just made sure the little sprout was sticking up through the material. If it was underneath, it would probably grow sideways and die. And the last thing I wanted to plant very early in the season here is something called elephant garlic. I didn't realize when I purchased these, but each one of these is an individual clove of elephant garlic. I thought they were going to be broken up into different pieces, so I grabbed just a few of them. I figured I'd grab a few plants off of each, but really they're just one plant. By itself, each one of these cloves is the size of one regular full garlic. I'll have to head back to the garden store to buy a bunch more of these because I didn't get enough. I only bought 3. This required a bigger hole as well. I just forced a bigger hole and pushed it down exactly like the rest of them. Because this video is starting to get a bit long, I'm going to break it up into a few different parts. In some of the next videos, I plan to show how I started my seeds, transplanted them out into the garden, as well as doing an update on how everything turned out. If you'd like to see those videos, please hit subscribe. If you thought this video earned it, please give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching Little Home Projects.